Hey guys, what's going on? So I was thinking about what the key difference is, right, between people that make it in the business or even get in the business and people that don't get in the business or don't even make it in the business, right? And it all came back to like a willingness to take a risk, right? So I'm sure you guys have all heard a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? But when you're talking from a leadership standpoint and like a success standpoint, I guess, that phrase doesn't really do any good, right? Because leaders have to learn to take risks, calculated risks, not needless risks, but they need to learn to take risks, right? Because you won't get a high reward without taking some level of risk, right? If you're always taking a low risk, you're always going to yield a low reward, okay? And it's kind of seen in our wage system, right? So you're going for what you assume is stable in like a job, right? Um, and in return, you're going to get a stable salary, right? You're going to get benefits, all that sort of stuff, right? But as you like venture out and take more of a risk, like you see in traditional business, right? You put up like I don't know 75,000 to I think it's like 1.5 million of like upfront cost. So you put that up, and you're going to yield a greater reward, but you are taking a greater risk, right? And it all comes back to like that leadership perspective, right? So leaders are naturally going to take more risks, and they're going to bear the burden of whether it fails or whether it succeeds, right? So if it's their fault if it fails, but it's also their fault if it succeeds, right? And a good leader, a leader with integrity, is always going to own it if it was a mistake, right? Just like they're going to own it if it was a success, okay? Um, and when we are like in the wage system and stuff, it is when you're stable that you fall, right? It's when you think you're stable that you fall, right? As soon as you stop trying to balance, that's when you're probably going to lose your balance, okay? So people think that the wage system is super stable because that's what their parents did and their parents before them, right? But especially in the modern day, things are getting far less stable, right? We're pretty much getting replaced with technology, right? In all the like labor jobs. Like I used to work at a distribution center, right? So we would put like stock onto pallets and then we'd ship it out to like supermarkets, right? And basically one day, me and all my coworkers, we got a text saying that we're going to basically be replaced by machines in about 3 years, right? And the only reason they told us that long ahead of time is because they had to, right? So these corporations, they're looking to replace us with a cheaper alternative. And the more complex and the more educated you are, it just means it's going to be longer before they can replace you, right? They're still going to replace you at some point, and so that stability in the modern like evolution of technology is failing, right? So it's not whether or not you take a risk, because you're taking a risk whether or not you get a job today. It's whether or not you take the right risk and the most calculated risk, right? And the best decision would be to get into business, because it is a risk that it doesn't work out for you, sure. But the only thing you're actually going to lose is time, right? Because that startup cost is like next to nothing. It's like $100 nowadays, right? Um, and so now I'm going to talk a little bit about fear, right? Okay, so fear is basically, it's not real, right? It's all in our heads and it's all perspective, right? I've talked about that before, but whether or not you know it's real, or you how you like perceive it, you're never really fearful of the action itself, right? So you're fearful of getting up to the action, okay? Because when you're in a moment that like it's justified to be scary, you can't be scared because you need to be present to act, right? So if I'm falling from the sky, I'm doing skydiving or whatever, I can't be fearful. I can't be paralyzed with fear. And my brain knows that, right? So it doesn't let me be paralyzed by fear. It kicks me into action. It forces me to do something. And that's like find the cord on my parachute or whatever, right? So we aren't necessarily fearful of like the thing itself. We're fearful of leading up to it and getting up to it, right? And with contacting, all you're really afraid of is not having the answers to the questions that you're inevitably gonna get asked, right? So that's like people asking, what is it, right? And so this is actually a very different question. This is kind of a side note, but this is a very different question to is it Amway, right? Because is it Amway is basically a yes or no question. And if you say no or anything leading to no, then when you tell them it's Amway at the end, they're going to know you're lying, you're not a person of integrity, and you're not worth following, right? So it's a very different question. So if people ask, what is it? You just say, it's in the consumer product distribution like business, right? I work for a friend who does consumer products. And then if they ask what do they like distribute, you just pick 3 brands, right? So that's pretty simple. But if they ask if it's Amway, so basically you want to reply unassuming, right? So you basically don't want to let them know that they think it's a multi-level marketing scheme, right? Because their perception of what it is in a multi-level marketing scheme is basically incorrect, but they think that, right? So you want to answer unassuming with excitement and enthusiasm and say, it sure is, what do you know about it? Because you want them to tell you what they don't know, right? So by asking what they know about it, they're going to leave out the things that they don't know about it. And then you can kind of educate them from there, right? So when we are inviting, you do want to start with your family and friends first, okay? And this is basically because, well, you've got an opportunity on your hands. We all know that, right? But you want to share it with your loved ones first because you love them the most, right? So you're sharing a genuine opportunity with them. You're not trying to get anyone. You're sharing something that you genuinely believe can work and genuinely can work, right? And the second reason is because they're usually our harshest critics, right? And to contact and to basically develop this business, you need to develop a thick skin. And by showing your family and friends who are our harshest critics first, you're going to develop that thick skin very fast, right? And you're going to develop it from like probably your first couple weeks in the business, right? And that's going to carry on to talking about strangers, right? So yeah, basically if they insist on back to the contacting thing, if they insist on like specifics of what the business does and stuff, you start to push them away, right? Because that's how they know they're like asking too much, and you're not someone of low value who's just going to give their time up to someone who's just a skeptic, basically, right? So yeah, you don't want to waste your time with skeptical people, basically. If they're going too hard, you just be like, you ask them a question in return, right? So you'll be like, what's your marketing experience like, right? Because then what happens is they'll answer your question, but as soon as they answer your question, they're probably not going to ask another question because they think, oh, he's going to ask me another question about myself, right? So if they're a go-getter, if they're right for your business, then they're not going to keep asking questions. And if they do keep asking questions after that, you basically tell them, listen, I don't think we're going to like be a fit or whatever. I'll give you a call if anything changes, right? And if they really are right for your business, they're gonna call you back, or they're gonna say, no, let's meet and give you a time and day, and they're gonna be keen, right? And if it works out that way, then you've developed a whole lot of posture, right? Because you were about to close the door on them, and they've just like basically pleaded with you to keep that door open, right? And I'm just going to talk a little bit about probably one of the most common but difficult objections that I've had to like teach people to overcome, right, in my downline. So basically, it's a herd mentality one, right? So it's my friend tried that and it didn't work out for them, right? So usually I'll be like, yeah, I get that. I had someone the other day tell me the exact same thing, right? And I basically asked that guy if he has the same if he has the same ambition level as his friend, and he didn't think so, right? He thought he was more ambitious than his friend. And the reason I third party it like that is because, like, I'm kind of insulting them, right? But if I third party it, I'm insulting them, but I'm insulting someone like them, so they can't really get offended by it. Does that make sense? And yeah, so I basically, if they then like decide to get into business, I'll tell them, don't ever base your chance of success on someone who's failed, because all you're ever going to learn from someone that's failed is how to fail, right? I'm someone that's succeeding in the business, and I can teach you how to do it, just like I'm doing it, right? It's not complicated. I'm not different from you. I'm just willing to take the chance on it. And if you're willing to take the chance on it too, I can show you how to succeed. And yeah, so that's everything for tonight, guys. Have a good night.